Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation as well. Hello, guys. How are you? I already lost my 30 seconds now. Let's start from the beginning. So sensory mapping. So what we do at Nokia Bell Labs, it's we try to quantify the intangible, the invisible. And today I'm going to show you a few examples of how you possibly quantify something that is really sort of subjective. You can't really put a finger on it. So, and it's about mapping, sensory mapping. So what are those? Well, the first thing you think about is maps and your senses, right? As simple as that. So let's start in the specific context of the city, so the smart city. Okay, so what is a smart city? It's a city that is smart. So, so the typical thing is, you know, you go to work, you're always going to be on time. That's what Cisco would say. When you go shopping, there is no queue, and you feel really, really safe because of the CCTV cameras around you. Now, all these things about safety, security, convenience are great, but they make a city acceptable. They don't make it great. We wanted to study things that make a city great, and that's why with Rossano and Luca, we open up goodcitylife.org, which is sort of a website. When you go there, there is a newsletter, and there is a community that is about studying things that make a city great, not acceptable. Okay, FaceMash. How many of you know how Facebook started? Raise your hand. You have 10 seconds. Yeah, good. So FaceMash started in a very simple way, and actually with Facebook started with FaceMash. And the idea was to compare the hottest on campus, right? Which one is hotter, left or right? And then you would do a top 10 hottest on campus. Fortunately, we didn't do FaceMash for cities, but for girls, but we did it for cities. So if I were to ask you which one is more beautiful and makes you happier, hey, don't be shy. B, there you go. Thank you very much. So we did a website based on this idea, and based on thousands of people votes, we could actually rank those pictures by beauty, by quietness, by happiness. Just going back to what I said, we try to quantify the intangible. We try to quantify things like happiness. It's really difficult to quantify in terms of vision, right? The visual cues that generally associated by people with happiness. And of course, those are Google Street Views, right? And Google Street Views are points on a map. So we are geeks, like most of you. So what do geeks with points? They connect them, right? So we connect them. And you know, you have the beauty score, so you connect the points by beauty. And the result was the creation of a totally different tool that is called Happy Maps. And that's what was referred before, that instead of giving you from UCL to Tate Modern the shortest path, as Google Maps will give you, it's going to give you the happy path, the quiet path, the beautiful path. And the idea is that instead of walking 20 minutes, you walk 22, and you have a totally different experience. Now, of course, this is based on a game. It's about like the visual cues, but your senses, there are many more in addition to vision, right? Hopefully, yes. So for example, there is the sense of smell, right? And you would say, well, maybe it's not that important. What is actually very important? You know, humans can discriminate more than 1 trillion different kinds of smells. So look at your nose, and you're looking at a big data machine, right? So smells are really important. You have a lot of potential there in your nose. And yet, if you think about city planning, they actually think about only 10 or 20 odors, right? The usual ones, the ones that are disturbing people. Why? Because smell is very difficult to capture, right? So as simple as that. So we don't have technologies nowadays to capture the full spectrum of 1 trillion different kinds of smells. And that's why we came up with the idea of capturing it with smell walks. So basically, around the world, we ask people to smell stuff, sniff around, and we captured their smell descriptors. So over the years, we collected 380 plus descriptors of urban smells. You just imagine those are words. And we match them with georeference picture tags on Flickr and Instagram. And just to make people happy on Twitter, but it doesn't work that well. So we match these Flickr picture tags on the city, and we capture only the ones that are related to smell. What can you do with that? Again, we are geeks, so we like graphs and things. So for example, you can create a graph, right? And with this graph, you have nodes, there are words, and you connect words that co-occur together. So violet and rose co-occur together. Now, if you look at this graph carefully, after counting the number of co-occurrences, you start to see a structure emerging, right? You start to see that words that are related to animals are all together, right? Words that are related to nature are all together. Now, all of a sudden, a list of words is structured. Each word has got subcategories and categories, all this stuff. So the result of that research was the creation of the first urban smell wheel, where, you know, on the external part you have example words of smell, and on the inner part you have all the categories, big categories of smell: waste, animals, metro industry, nature, food. But the really important point here is that you don't only have the bad smells, but you have also the good ones. And of course, we know Instagram and Flickr, it's bias, geographic bias. Just to make sure, we check that our results match the nitrogen dioxide official data for London, and they do match. You have nitrogen dioxide, you have emission words. You have an absence of nitrogen dioxide, you have nature words. And just to give you an example, you can't see really well because maybe city universities doesn't have the right lights, but you can see a map of London, you know, you have the river, and here we're looking for words of a specific category, for example, nature. And you can map the entire naturescape of the city. And of course, you can go around that wheel and you can take the next category, right? And then you have the food category, for example, and you can map the entire foodscape of London. So you can map the entire foodscape, which means basically this technique is scalable to the entire city and is also replicable. So once you do for one city, you can replicate for other cities. So just if you go on goodcitylife.org, you can actually interact with the map. You can interact with street segments, and you can look at the smell profile of the street segments, also the emotional profiles nowadays, and you can look it up at the streets where the street where you live, and you can see whether you should move or you could stay. We've done the same project not only for another sense, right, which is the sense of sound, what you hear. More or less, the idea is the same. We have a dictionary, totally data-driven in this case, and we map the entire soundscape of the city, right? Now you can see where I'm going with the senses. Basically, the idea is very simple. You have one city, you have multiple layers of what we find visually beautiful, or what we could smell, what we could hear, and we are basically connecting these layers with the well-being and happiness of people. And that's what we do on goodcitylife.org. Just go there, subscribe to the newsletter, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Couple of questions, anticipating many, so please.
How do you get the data on the smells? Like, what's your process?
Say again?
How do you get the data on the smells? How do you know which part smells like what?
Oh, right. How do you get the data from smell? Yeah. That's the question. I'm repeating it for the microphone. So basically, what you do is that you take picture tags, right? So imagine a street segment, yeah, and you take sort of all the picture tags that geo-reference in there, and then you match only the tags and match the dictionary, right? And then you have only the urban smell words in there, or in the case of the sound thing, you have only the urban sound words. That's how we do it.
Yes, please.
Roughly how many people were involved in those tags?
Tags.
How many people?
So basically, just imagine that the whole, so in the previous game, in the game of pairwise comparison of urban, there were involved, I think, 3,000, 4,000 people. But in the case of the smell, and that's a powerful thing of social media, we actually use existing pictures, right? So just imagine London has got more than 1 billion picture tags, right, from Flickr. So that's what we use.
Okay, maybe the last one. Yes?
But if people, sorry, if people use words to describe smell on Flickr and everything, aren't you afraid that there's an implicit bias? Is that people are going to only record smells that are really strong, whether in the good sense or the bad sense, but
Yep.
they might miss out on more subtle, less interesting.
Yep. So the question is that if there is any bias in capturing this kind of smell based on the fact that we captured it from Flickr pictures, right, or pictures in general. Yes, there are a lot of biases. So one thing, but you should think that there is one main bias that actually works in our favor. And that is, usually when we mention a smell, we don't mention the chemical compound of the smell. We actually mention the source, the likely source of the smell, right? So this kind of bias is actually working in our favor because that's actually what people picture, right, in the pictures. Then, of course, you can counter the bias by extracting things that are from the images without looking at tags. That's another way. But the main bias here is due to the nature of smell, right? You can actually think about smells being of three types. Just think about when you go to the shopping mall, if you go. So you try a perfume, right? And you might try the perfume on your wrist. So on your wrist, you have some odors that they're fleeting and they will go away, right? And then those are the top notes of the perfume. And then, you go shopping around, and after 2 hours, you smell your wrist, and those are the sort of base notes, the things that stay there. Now, what we can capture with this technique is a sort of base nodes in the city, sort of mid-level nodes, but we cannot capture localized, temporally and spatially odors, right? The fleeting nodes. And that's the huge thing that you should capture with totally different techniques.
Okay, last one. Quick one.
Yeah.
Very quick.
I was analyzing Flickr data a few years ago, and recently I noticed that some people are very active in terms of how they upload photos and tag them. I'm wondering how your algorithm considers that. So what happens if somebody tags 1,000 photographs, puts them in the middle of London, and tags them all as?
Yeah. So the question: how do you deal with power users? Users that share too much, right? They actually are. So there was one guy, I think, in Good Street that was sharing things about rubbish. So we had a sort of spike of rubbish in Good Street, which is not typically the case in Bloomsbury, right? So you actually have to smooth out things, right? So whenever you try to have distinct tags coming from distinct users, and then you look at a profile and you should smooth, and so you apply sort of smoothing thing for on that data. So that's the only way. Otherwise, you're bound to have problems with these power users sharing things in a specific category, for example.
All right. Let's thank Daniele again.